Good morning, I'm Michael Walsh and I'm going to talk to you about my PhD project, which I'm into year 3 part-time. It's a Celtic or national aesthetic, flute playing in the contemporary Asturian folk scene, and the speech marks over the Celtic and national are important because they're contested ideas. Okay. Tocas una que algo huele a cucho. That means play something or play one that smells of cow dung. Okay. And interestingly, I checked with one of my field informants this morning, and the H, if you're a true Asturian, would be a G. So there you go. But I'm only in year 3. I've got another 3 years to go to check. So where's Asturias? Okay. Asturias is in the north of Spain. If you go to Portugal, up the top is Galicia, turn right, the next bit is Asturias. Okay, why Asturias and why this particular subject? Well, Asturias is an example of a multi-layered complexity of national identity and its expression through folk music and dance. The concept of Asturian as a national project has developed differently to other national projects within Spain, such as Basque Country, Galicia, and Catalonia, which has been in the news a great deal. The independence movement there is not popular in terms of electoral success, and Castilian is the main language, unlike some of the other autonomous communities where, for example, Catalonian and Basque and Galician have equity in terms of legislation. The Asturian language, or Bable, as it's sometimes called, doesn't have that. So it's an interesting one for me in terms of its difference. And also, it's largely absent from discussions around nationalism and folk music within academic discourse. Okay. So, tocas una que algo huele a cucho. Play something that has the smell of cow dung. I'll try it. Okay, can you hold that for me? Very quickly, let's see this word. So, that's Pasacalles do Oviedo in Asturian, or Pasacalles de Oviedo in Castilian, which means to take, Pasacalles is to take a step into a street. So, and does it reek of manure? Well, some people might say, I'm not playing great, but also, is it essentially authentic? That's a very controversial, difficult word. How can I be authentic in terms of, I'm not from Asturias? I'm playing on a simple system wooden flute, similar to the that's played by much of the flute players in Asturias, but mine's newly constructed. Is that authentic? And the other thing as well is I'm playing something that's played in the street, but yet the wooden flute traditionally was played in the house. It was something that the pipers would have played. It would have been a private instrument. It was obviously a lot easier to play than pipes, bagpipes, which are very noisy, as you know. So lots of contradictions there in terms of the smell of manure and authenticity too. Okay. So, here you go. Some Asturian bagpipers, gaiteros in Asturian. In terms of Asturias and what's authentic, I'll use a quote from one of my fieldwork sources, Diego Pangua. He's a flute player and piper, and he said that Asturianness, or what's authentic about Asturian music, it's the magical space where Asturian identity comes from. It's a mixture of the cattle grazer, the miner, the fisherman, the tonada, folk singer, if you like, and the bagpiper, all mixed into one. It's the rural, it's the urban, okay? So lots of contradictions there. Again, toca suona che algo vuela cuccio. During the Franco regime, Franco had a different idea of what was authentic and what Spain should smell of. And he used the section femenina, which is the women's branch of the Falange party, to go around instructing people how to be Spanish. Okay? And in particular stores because of the political situation previously, because of the communist government there, and its resistance to Franco's push for power. Asturias was particularly stamped on heavily, and there was a real push to sort of wipe out Asturianness and really push Spanishness. There you go. So, during the transition period after Franco, there was the beginning to redefine Asturianness through folk music. And there were a number of options at that time. So there's folklorica. Folklorica was what the section femenina largely pushed, and that had a tinge, the taint of fascism about it, and it's still talked about that today. Not an option for some. The New Song movement, which was a political movement related to the folk song movements and the protest movements around Europe. This was a little bit later, obviously, because of Franco. And there was a risky strategy if you wanted to get involved in that. There was pipe bands, which traditional can be in terms of as recent and relevant as Scottish and Irish pipe bands too. Okay. And there was the emerging global Celtic music phenomenon. Okay. And that opened up international opportunities across the Atlantic arc, which is all the other Celtic countries, Scotland, Ireland, Brittany, Isle of Man, and Wales and Cornwall, and opportunities beyond. The guy there in the middle is Marcus Jope. He's a flute maker now, but he was the lead singer and flute player with a band called Jan de Cubel, who based their format on much of the formats that we're seeing in Irish and Scottish and Breton folk revival groups, so the standard of a bouzouki guitar, melody instrument, and percussionist, for example, a cajon or a barron player. So he used the flute as the wooden flute, as a nod to an authentic past, but also a connection to the wider Atlantic arc. There you go. What I've sensed, that's developed over the last few years, what I've sensed in the last couple of years when I've been doing my fieldwork is that there's a sense of once we were Celtic. So there's a redefining of the music in terms of identity, saying, well, are we really Celts? The Celtic thing didn't quite fit. It's problematic. We don't share a language group in terms of Asturian. Galician has got a Romance root, and a lot of the pan-Celtic movements would define their identity around the Gaelic language heritage. So it doesn't really fit. So they've gone back to, perhaps we're more Asturian and more Spanish than we think we are. We share common tunes and heritage in terms of, for example, a jota, which is a dance which you'll find in Cantabria and Castile and Leon. They've started redefining, moving away from a performance model of Celtic music, which was on the stage being performed to people, and looking at the roots of the music and looking at the dance. And that's really encouraged a lot of the musicians to start really thinking about how they play the music, what it means to them, and how it's related to the dance. From this, there's a phenomenon of Noche and Danza, which is a dance movement of young and old, where the Celtic nights have disappeared due to fashion, due to cuts in public funding. And this is a movement in terms of redefining ourselves. This is perhaps looking away from the Atlantic and looking towards Iberia and redefining themselves. But yet people say, well, you know, we can still be Celtic too. And there is a link and there is a connection for us that's useful, but we can redefine ourselves, and we can be a mixture. We can have a smell of the Atlantic, we can have a smell of Iberia, and both can be authentic and real to us in a contemporary context. The flute playing right through this is a continuum. It's continued from the Celtic, from the old, right through to the Nuecha and dancer. Although what it's used for has changed and adapted, and we can't claim that there is a continual link from the past to the present. Okay, thank you very much.